Welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. Today, as our title suggests, this is part 2. You can find part 1 where we covered denial, asking for a deceased relative, paranoia, and I want to go home in our recorded video page on our website. The link to that will be at the end of the session. Today, though, we will be covering a few more of the common behaviors that we often get asked about. As always, we recognize that all behavior has meaning and it's typically a way of communicating a need, whether that be a physical, emotional, a social, spiritual, or other need. So while you may be experiencing these as challenging behavior, it can be helpful to both of you to try to reframe that as needs-driven dementia-related behavior. I do want to note that on the session today, we're going to focus on specific strategies. So it might be helpful if you have attended our webinar or watched our recording on understanding behaviors before today. But don't worry, if you haven't done that, you will find the recording to this webinar on our website at the recorded webinar page. And once again, that will be posted at the end of this session. Let's take a look at our session overview for today. The behaviors we're going to focus on today are firstly word salad, which is also known as progressive aphasia, then confabulation, followed by shadowing, and finally anxious behavior. So we'll share some information about what may cause a behavior, and then we'll follow that up with some strategies for responding. However, please try to think of the strategies you hear about today as tools in your toolbox. I know we often use this analogy in our webinars, and there's a reason for repeating this. Not all tools work for every job, and depending on the job, not all tools work well each time. So like dementia, as we know, what works one day may not work another, and even if a strategy works well for someone else, and they may even suggest it to you because it's working for them, it just may not work for your current situation, or maybe it'll work at a later stage. So please remember to try your best just to remain flexible and patient when responding in the moment. But also, very important part is to be kind to yourself. These strategies do take time to master. Before we look at the 4 behaviors today, I want to take a few minutes just to set the stage and to present our first strategy. Because of the brain changes associated with dementia, the responsibility for responding lies with us, the care partners, not with the person living with dementia. They are not the ones that are able to make the changes or respond differently. So therefore, it is vital that care partners take a couple of moments to grab hold of their own emotions, to settle themselves, and to be able to respond in as calm and compassionate way as possible. I also want to acknowledge that this is not necessarily as easy as it sounds, especially if you're already starting from a place of feeling very overwhelmed and exhausted. But this strategy is honestly quite simple. It's as simple as breathing, but breathing a little differently. So in fact, to demonstrate this, I would like us to join in together. So if you feel comfortable, please go ahead and close your eyes right now. I'd like you to sit up straight, relax your shoulders. I'm going to give you a few instructions and then we're going to do this together. So gently close your mouth. You will then take, when we start, a deep breath through your nose for 2 seconds. And then you want to purse your lips as if you're cooling a hot drink or soup. And you're going to exhale. You're going to breathe out for 4 seconds. So it's you breathing in through your nose, deep breath for 2 seconds, and then your exhale as you purse your lips for double that time for 4 seconds. Okay, so let's try that. You ready? Gently close your mouth. Take a deep breath in for 2 seconds. And then purse your lips as if you're cooling off that soup. And exhale for 4 seconds. Let's repeat that. Breathe in. Purse your lips. And exhale for 4. So how did that feel? Did you notice, or do you notice, any difference in how you feel at the moment? Could you feel some tension released from your body? Possibly feeling a little bit more focused or maybe present? So that feeling is what you need before you jump into a conversation. Care partners tell us over and over again that they learn to choose their battles, consciously pausing and deciding whether to take action or not. So it's from this centered place we are also able to pause and adjust our tone of voice, speaking slowly and calmly, because it's not only what we say, as we well know and have experienced, but how we say it. And of course, our body language says so much. And while breathing is simple, I really want to reiterate, we are not in any way saying that learning to stop in that stressful moment and take a couple of breaths is easy. Finding the pause absolutely takes practice. However, it can honestly become part of your normal. So it can actually become comfortable. Personally, for myself, I actually started using this technique when I had to do some public speaking. I wasn't used to it, and I would develop quite severe anxiety before I had to talk. Someone mentioned this technique and I started using it. And it even got to a point where it felt like some self-care for myself. And now I do it on a regular basis. It's like that moment of refuge and safety before you're heading out into the storm. So when we talk about ways of responding to various behaviors caused by dementia, we recommend following a three-step approach to guide your response. So first of all, we identify the emotion behind the story. So what feelings are they experiencing? Do they sound worried, happy, excited, maybe scared? So you need to be observant and curious. Take your time to understand how the person with dementia is feeling and what need they might be expressing through their behavior. Secondly, you want to validate that emotion. So how this looks will depend on the emotion being expressed. So for example, if the emotion is worry, you might say something like, "It sounds like you're very worried about Mary." Or, "That's a scary thought." Accompanying this with a gentle touch if appropriate, that may just help to turn the person's attention away from the thought and towards you instead. Think about a time when you have been worried and scared, anxious, or maybe confused. You don't want to be dismissed. We want acceptance and validation that what we're feeling actually makes sense. You could say, "Mum is out with some friends, but don't worry, she'll be home later." "There's a bad storm tonight, so he's staying over at Joe's house just to be safe." Or, "It sounds like you really loved your brother very much. Tell me about him." So these are just some examples of how we can validate what it is that the person is feeling, which then will allow us to come alongside of them to support them with a response. And then thirdly, we will use distract or redirect. So distraction and redirection can be successful after taking sufficient time to validate emotions. That's such an important point to remember. Often we are in a rush and just want to jump directly to the step and offer all sorts of distractions to change the subject and move on. Often we're just almost afraid of validating those feelings. We're not quite sure where that's going to lead us, but validation is key. It gives the brain a chance to share its reality, its worries, and it prepares it to switch gears. So once you've validated the person's emotional reality and what it is that they're feeling, we can then move on and redirect the person's attention to something else. So, for example, we could say, Mary isn't here right now, but I think she would love the shepherd's pie if she was. What's Mary's favorite meal? Use your knowledge of the person to respond in a way that would make sense to them. What about their life history or their likes and dislikes could you draw on? If you're finding it difficult to redirect the person after you have used validation and validated their emotional reality, and yet nothing seems to be working, then try changing the environment. We have heard that from a lot of care partners that this sometimes does make a difference. Just as something simple as moving to another room, or maybe it means going for a short walk or a drive or putting on some music. Keep this three-step model in mind as we look at 4 different behaviors. So let us start with word salad. How many of you are caring for someone who mixes up their words or sentences and thinks that they're making perfect sense? It must be you who has the problem, right? So this is what we call aphasia. Some people may be particularly fluent in their speech. The words they use are articulated clearly and the rhythm of the speech makes sense. So you feel that it should all make sense, but it just doesn't. The words are out of order, jumbled, fragmented, or part of the word or sentence is missing. And it can be very difficult to understand what it is that the person is trying to say. I want you to listen to what I'm about to say and try to figure out what it is I'm telling you. Okay, here we go. I too see roses there tomorrow. We're beautiful. Red, black, all should go back their wagon time. Okay, maybe some of you have figured it out. I'm going to do it again. Are you ready? I too see roses there tomorrow. We're beautiful. Red, black, all should back their wagon time. What is it that you think I'm telling you? Okay, so this is what I was trying to say. I went to see the roses by the pond yesterday. They were beautiful. Red, yellow, all colors. We should go back there. We'll take the wagon next time. So in my head, this made perfect sense. But you probably had a puzzled look on your face while you listened and tried to understand, even when I repeated it. So what happened to my words when I was talking? Let's see. Well, I certainly mixed some words up. I said tomorrow, but I actually meant yesterday. I also said black, but I meant yellow. I also missed some words altogether, some of which were quite important for understanding the context of what I was saying. Now, not everybody misses words. Not everybody mixes them up. But we often hear that people find it incredibly frustrating to experience this word salad, where essentially the words have become all mixed up. It can be exhausting trying to understand someone experiencing aphasia, and we are told it is equally exhausting trying to deal with a situation where someone just doesn't understand you. So there could be many reasons a person experiences aphasia, but the type of aphasia that is associated with dementia is called primary progressive aphasia, or the acronym PPA. So it's caused by damage to parts of the brain that are responsible for speech and language. There are several types of progressive aphasia associated with dementia, which affects a person's speech and language in different ways. So as we saw in the example just now, some people forget the meaning of words, what objects are for, and concepts. So you might notice a person using a vague term to describe something. So for example, they may ask you to pass the broccoli on the table, but they'll say the following: could you just pass that green stuff? Or they may just refer to that thing. So someone with aphasia might also forget the purpose of an object. One of the examples I often use when we talk about normal age-related memory loss versus dementia is that most of us have experienced that annoying misplacing of our car keys from time to time. But are you able to remember what the keys are for once you find them? A person with progressive aphasia might even have trouble recognizing the keys or remembering what they're used for. And they may also have trouble reading or spelling words. So therefore books and writing become more challenging. They may pronounce words incorrectly or use words incorrectly in sentences. Pause more often when speaking because they're searching for that right word. And when the word comes out, they may be incorrect, in the wrong order, or missing altogether. Another reason why aphasia is so challenging is because some people who have trouble with aphasia may be totally unaware of how their sentences are coming out and may get really frustrated when others have trouble understanding them. Or if they do have some awareness of their impairment, they might reduce how often they talk or stop talking altogether. And that is out of embarrassment or fear of making a mistake. And if this happens, be really vigilant for signs of depression. Not being able to speak can be incredibly isolating. For someone more advanced in their dementia, the words might turn to sounds and be indistinguishable as language altogether. So for example, one woman I knew who lived in a care home would say rhythmic sounds that seemed to make perfect sense to her, but to me they would sound something like ba, ma, ya, ba ma, ya, ma, ma. And just as I did there, every now and then she would throw in a subtle laugh. And I could pick up that she was telling me a funny story. So I would take this cue and I would quietly chuckle back while stroking her hand. Sometimes it would absolutely get tiring when she repeated this, but as long as the emotion she conveyed appeared positive, I knew that it was a positive experience for her, and we were both able to enjoy this time together and make a positive connection. Let us now take a look at how we use our three-step process for responding to aphasia. So step one of the three-step process is to identify the emotion being conveyed. Does the person speaking look sad or anxious or excited? Their tone of voice and facial expressions may be saying way more than the words that they're using or attempting to use. You want to focus on the feeling and any nonverbal cues that you see if they can derive what that meaning is. So if you're unsure whether you've understood correctly, try confirming your interpretation with the person to give them a chance to correct you if you're wrong. And this also shows that you're listening and that you care enough about what they're saying, that you want to get it right. Step two is validation. So for example, you could say, "You sound nervous. Am I right? I'll stay right here with you." So this is a great way to offer reassurance to the person that you're on their side. And if despite all your best efforts, you still don't understand what the person is trying to say, then acknowledge how frustrating it must feel for them. At this point, you might be feeling pretty frustrated yourself. So take that deep breath and say something like, I'm sorry, I don't understand. This is hard for me too. Or, you're right, it is frustrating. I think so too. Generally speaking, no one likes to feel ignored or dismissed. When responding to someone who has aphasia, let them know you are listening. You can do this by responding with a simple acknowledgement. That was very interesting. Thank you for sharing that with me. Or, oh really? I didn't know that. This is another example of the validation step in this three-step process for responding. Use close-ended questions that can be answered with a yes or no to help narrow in on what they're trying to say or to verify that you've understood correctly. So for example, if you're hearing a word being repeated, you might say something like, I hear you saying cookie. Are you hungry? If they answer no, you might say, okay, would you like to go for a walk to the store? Perhaps they do want a cookie, or perhaps they meant something totally different, and cookie was the word they swapped in for what they meant to say. Ask the person to show you what it is they want or are referring to, and you could also try putting out a plate of snacks so that if they are hungry, they can meet that need. If the person with aphasia is still able to write, perhaps ask them to communicate their message in writing. I'm really sorry, but I'm not quite following what you're saying. Could you write it down for me? Want to try your best to listen to the context of what the person is trying to say. What are the nouns and the consonants that you can make out? And do they match the verbs? So what do we mean by that? So for example, say they say dancing phone. Maybe they mean ringing phone. All they've done is mixed up the verb in the sentence. Or walk cat might be walk dog. And in this case, they've mixed up the noun. And then you want to look for any non-verbal cues the person is using to help you understand what it is they're trying to say. Are they walking toward the door? Are they maybe licking their lips? Shifting in their seat, look uncomfortable? This might indicate they're needing to go somewhere, maybe they're hungry, or they have to use the washroom. And then if you're still having trouble understanding what the person is trying to say, and you feel yourself or the other person getting frustrated, sometimes it can help to take a break from the conversation altogether by possibly going for a walk, offering a cup of tea, or offering another activity that both of you might enjoy. So let's take a look at our second common behavior that is somewhat related to word salad, confabulation. And so this is when the person fills in the gaps in their memory with stories or made up facts. Confabulation is an unconscious and unintentional way for our brains to fill in any missing pieces of the puzzle to try to make sense of the world. So for example, if you live in a condo, you may know that the periodic banging from the unit above is due to your neighbors renovating their kitchen. But a person with dementia might insist, the kids are at it again. Tell them to stop jumping off the bed. Our brains are association machines. They like to find association between things because this is a way that helps us to make sense of the world, and especially when the world is increasingly making less sense. So if you have forgotten that neighbor noise is just part of condo living, but your brain is actually back in time to when you lived in a multi-level house with several young children, then your brain associated that loud banging upstairs with the kids pretending to be monkeys, jumping off the bed just like they always used to do. Now this makes sense, and this is their reality. So there is no point in arguing and insisting that it's the neighbors doing their renovation. You might, however, respond with something like this. You're right. That is loud. I'll go right away and remind them to stay in bed. And you just leave it at that. As opposed to saying, no, don't you remember? That's Jim and Sue upstairs renovating their kitchen. The kids are grown up now. They moved to Ontario years ago. I wonder if anyone's tried that and made any progress. So often that's when the conversation really gets confusing. What do you mean they live in Ontario? They're too young to be on their own. Who took them there? Why didn't anybody tell me? I can assure you, and many of you would agree with me that are listening today, that nobody comes out a winner in these arguments, and you'll likely both come out feeling frustrated or even angry. So try your best to be patient and to meet the person where they're at in their reality. We refer to this approach as connect, don't correct. The goal is never to fix the facts or correct the mistake. The goal is to make a connection. There are not very many things that we say are do nots when we present strategies. But in this case, I really need to ask you to avoid using this one phrase. Don't you remember? Who has said this? Now, if you were in person, I guarantee you could look around the room right now and see quite a few hands raised in the air, or some sheepish looks. But you know, it's such a natural question to ask. We all do it from time to time without even thinking about it. However, when someone is struggling with their memory and other cognitive symptoms, this phrase can just be a reminder of what they don't remember, and it can make the person feel like a failure. You want to try to ask questions that set the person up for success. So, for example, instead of testing the person and asking, who is this in the picture? You might say, I know that's you in that beautiful yellow dress, but I'm not quite sure who this man is next to you. This gives the person the chance to be successful if they know the answer and avoid failure if they don't. Or in the context of confabulation, they might fill in the gap in their memory and tell you all about the man being their first boyfriend, even though you know that it's actually your Uncle Brian. So what? Remember that in this moment, you're connecting, not correcting, and the facts just don't matter. So we're now going to look at shadowing. This is another common challenge we hear about where care partners find it really difficult to get a moment alone. You know, every time you try to run a quick errand or just leave the room to use the washroom, the person you're caring for is right there beside you. Does that sound familiar? I'd like you to take a moment to think of those times when you are, say, driving down the highway, but you can't remember which exit to take and you need to make a decision now. I've experienced that when we first came to the Lower Mainland, and that was 20 plus years ago, and I was getting closer to the Port Mann Bridge and I knew I needed to take that exit to Coquitlam, but in that moment I just couldn't decide what to do, and guess where I would go? Yes, right over the Port Mann and have to come all the way back. Or think about being in a room full of people you don't know, and you're searching and hoping to come across that familiar face. It's an uneasy feeling. You might feel some confusion, perhaps a little worried, a little scared, unsure of yourself. You sort of start to lack some confidence. Now, for a person living with dementia, this feeling can be experienced on a regular basis. And I'm not talking weekly, this can be daily and often several times a day. The world is gradually becoming more unfamiliar, more confusing, and unpredictable. So to cope with the changes, you stay close to the person who feels comfortable and for whom you rely on to help you navigate and make sense of the world. They're your map and your familiar face in the crowd, so you stay close. And this is what we call shadowing. When we want to understand and respond to needs-driven behaviors, we become curious, kind of like a detective. We assume that the behavior is telling us something, and it's something we probably need to know. When you reflect, what might your person need to feel and experience when they are shadowing you? Shadowing typically, not always, but typically happens when a person's dementia becomes more progressed and their memory worsens. And this is often in the mid to late stages of the disease. You know, the concept of time then is not as clear as it once was. So when you're out of sight for just a moment, to them it can feel like ages. And because of the decline in their short-term memory, they can't remember when you left the room, or when you said you'll be back, or when you do come back, what that time frame was. And so that causes fear and anxiety, which I'll speak about more shortly. Remember that as a care partner, you've essentially become a life preserver in a sea of uncertainty. And as long as they're close to you, they feel safe and reassured. It's also really important to note that shadowing is usually very exhausting and frustrating for care partners. It's completely normal to find this behavior particularly challenging. We are all human beings and we all need time to ourselves. Taking care of yourself and acknowledging your own need for a break is a vital part of being a good caregiver. So going back to our three-step model, the first thing we always want to do when responding to a needs-driven behavior is to identify what the emotion is that is being expressed so that we can validate the person. So for example, you're trying to step away to cook dinner, but the person you're caring for won't leave your side in the kitchen and you're finding it difficult to maneuver around. You might notice the person's even getting upset. Perhaps they start accusing you of not wanting to be around them or trying to get away from them. And this absolutely can be hurtful because that's not your intention. We can see they're upset. So let's validate this. You look quite upset. I really do enjoy our time together, but could really use your help to get dinner ready. Do you mind helping me mash the potatoes? So you've identified the emotion they're feeling and you've validated the feeling by providing an opportunity to stay close. But you're also shifting into step 3 by redirecting their focus to a task. Sometimes just engaging the hands when we feel anxious or worried can help to calm the brain. If the person likes jigsaw puzzles, try keeping a puzzle available on the table for them. Think about what activities are meaningful to them that could keep them engaged. And if it's really just not a good day, don't be afraid to pull out that ice cream. Not all, but most people love ice cream. It's sweet, it's comforting, it can take some time to eat, which sometimes is just enough time to give you that much needed break. Here are some other strategies that can help to reassure the person that they're okay and they're safe for those times when you aren't able to be in the same room with them. You could set an egg timer and let the person know that you'll be back when the timer goes off. Some we have heard have used a clock with designs that will show a countdown and provide a visual cue, like changing colors when the time is out. Others actually play a certain sound. If the person you're caring for needs to see or hear you for that reassurance, then you could try recording a video of yourself or even just your voice to play when you need to step away. You could record personalized messages for the person with reassuring phrases. You're okay. You're safe. Everyone is all right. Or you could record yourself reading one of their favorite books. Playing a favorite family video that is familiar to them, such as a family vacation from when you were a kid, or a favorite holiday video, can also be a really lovely way to make the person feel comforted. You could play their favorite music. Never underestimate the power of music. It's well studied that music evokes emotion and stimulates memories. So think about what calms the person and takes them back to a happy time in their life. Some people have recorded their voice reading books on tape to play while they're away, so their voice continues to provide comfort in their absence. A really creative strategy that a caregiver shared with me was using a two-way baby monitor to speak to her mom. So when she's in another room in the house working, she will then be able to talk to her mom through the baby monitor. Now, please note, for some people, this may be disorientating. So we always want to keep in mind that what may work well for some people might not work for others. And even what may work well for that person today might not work well tomorrow. Again, it's often our intimate knowledge of the person that can help us to come up with creative solutions. I also want to encourage you to involve others in the person's daily routine wherever possible. As Teepa noted in the video, shadowing is exhausting and we all need a break sometimes. So as much as possible, try to involve someone else in the person's care. You might start with having a close friend or a formal caregiver visit on a regular schedule while you're there. Then work your way up to you eventually being able to step away while another care partner provides companionship. We know this shift may take a while and could require several stages. Even absences just for 5 minutes can then build into 10 minutes break and eventually maybe 20 minutes with a phone call for reassurance. And then as the alternate care partner builds that trust and rapport, the absences can hopefully increase further. It will take time, but investing in another relationship that provides safety and comfort helps the primary caregiver to continue in their role. As each of you know and have experienced, caregiving requires endurance, patience, and lots of energy. And unfortunately, it's usually not sustainable if we don't take those much needed breaks. So we talked a bit about anxiety through our discussion of shadowing, but now we're going to dive more deeper into what can cause anxiety in people living with dementia and how we can respond in a supportive way. We all know what it feels like to be anxious about something. Your blood pressure rises, your heart beats faster, you feel on edge or hypervigilant. Because dementia affects a person's attention, emotional regulation, memory, decision-making, and overall ability to process stimuli in the environment, people living with dementia are much more susceptible to feelings of anxiety. And unfortunately, anxiety can exacerbate the symptoms of dementia. There are many reasons why a person living with dementia may have anxiety. Some of these include changes in the brain resulting from the dementia, which then affects the person's ability to regulate emotion. If they still have awareness of the changes they're experiencing, this could lead them to really worry about their future and worry about their family. And then the opposite, if the person doesn't have awareness, then their increasing difficulty in making sense of the world may cause them to feel anxious. It's also common if people have a family history of anxiety to become easily agitated. In fact, approximately half of all people who live with dementia experience symptoms of agitation every month. Any situation that makes it more challenging for the person with dementia to think can increase agitation. And this could include something as simple as going to a new store or redecorating your living room, meeting new people, absolutely, having guests over, including other caregivers in the home, and then changes to the person's daily routine, or moving to a new home entirely. The brain needs to make sense of all these changes, and it can make the person feel tired trying to process it all, or fearful if they don't remember what caused the change or why it's necessary. Like we saw in the Teeper Snow video, you might notice that the person starts to shadow you or stay close to you at all times because you are their safe person. This can make it very difficult to get a moment alone when they always need to be in the same room with you, or you can't leave the house without them. You may also notice the person fidgeting with their hands, clothing, or something else around them, or they might start pacing the halls. For those of you joining today and listening who are familiar with these behaviors, you will be able to attest to how exhausting this behavior can be at times. It's okay to say it as it is. We are all human. Patience and energy is not something we have endless quantities of. It is a skill that we work at over time with trial and error. First, I want to note that if you notice a sudden increase in anxiety or agitation, that it is important to rule out medical causes, like an infection or medication interaction. So always check with the doctor about abrupt changes in behavior. Now, in the interest of time, I won't get into all of the other possible causes and meaning of anxiety or agitation. For more information, you can view the recording on our website on understanding behaviors, where we go into more detail. But I do want to give you a few examples of how you can respond in the moment when the person you're caring for appears anxious. So once again, let's look at our three-step model. Start by listening to the person about what it is that is worrying them or causing them anxiety, and then providing reassurance. You want to encourage them to talk about what it is they're worried about. So for example, if the person is anxious about being left alone, they might try to follow you to the bathroom. Depending now on your comfort level, perhaps a compromise to having them right there in the washroom with you is to leave the door partway open so they can hear you talking to them and know where you are while you're still affording yourself some privacy. Use calming phrases like, "I'll be right here in the washroom. I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here with you. You're safe." And try pairing this with a few deep breaths. Often people living with dementia will match our reaction. So if we look at them and take a few deep breaths to calm ourselves, they may actually do the same. And this can have a great calming effect. Another calming phrase that is particularly validating is, "I'm sorry, this is really hard." Keep in mind that how you will respond will depend on what is causing the anxiety. What need are they expressing? Often, this is what they need is comfort and reassurance. If the person is anxious about friends or family not visiting anymore or excluding them from events, especially as it has been through this pandemic, they might not understand why they haven't been able to see certain family members. And you could try asking the people most important to that person to record a video message for them where they share positive memory or words of reassurance that make the person feel good when they watch it. Maintaining a regular routine can also go a long way in reducing anxiety. Can't emphasize that more than enough. We have a sense of control when we know what to expect next. So when there are changes to the routine, we worry over what might be coming next. When redirecting the person's focus, try to keep their regular routine as much as possible. And we're going to go over this in more detail in the next slide. Once you understand the emotional reality and then validate the feelings, engaging in anxiety-reducing activities can certainly help not only to reduce the onset of the anxiety, but also to help manage it once it comes on. We have included a link in our helpful resources to a document on activities that suggest activities you can try to reduce anxiety or agitation. Some of the examples are sorting items like colored paper or cutlery, or even the grandchildren's Lego by color. If these activities are part of an established routine for a person, it can do a lot to reduce feelings of anxiety. Now, depending on the person, household chores can also be a great way to help the person feel like they're doing something meaningful. An example of this is one caregiver shared with us. Her husband always washed dishes when they had company over. That had been his routine for years, and obviously she was thrilled with that. He would spend hours washing, and then now with his dementia, he would just rewash the same dishes until the visitors left. This was frustrating for the caregiver though, because she really wanted to enjoy some social time with friends as a couple. But unfortunately, having people in the house, even those he was fairly familiar with, made him incredibly anxious. Maybe some of you can relate to that. He was aware that his memory was getting worse and couldn't always find the right word. And he was terrified of anyone thinking that he was just stupid. He would get so worked up about the visit that by the time the guests arrived, he could only really manage a brief hello, half a smile, and would escape into the kitchen where the dishes kept him busy and helped him to feel calm again until they left. If the anxiety is more severe and non-pharmacological interventions aren't helping, then it may be worth a conversation with a doctor about the possibility of anxiety-reducing medication. We certainly have covered a lot in our session. So before we go, let's do a quick recap of the 4 behaviors we talked about. So for progressive aphasia, or word salad, we discovered that the reason or driving force behind this behavior is difficulty with speech and language. So what is their need? The need is patience and reassurance. How do you give that? Do they want you to jump in and help them find the word? Or is it cues they need? Do they want extra time to get that word on their own? And we recognize support will absolutely look different for everyone. Next was confabulation, or filling in the gaps in their memory with info that might not be accurate or correct. So what is the need there? Typically a need for comfort or stability and control. And how do we support this need? By validating what the person said, meeting them where they're at in their reality. We talked about shadowing. Again, what is the need? Well, shadowing is driven by fear or anxiety. So the need is for a feeling of safety. And how do we support them? Once again, importance of validating those fears. That's a scary thought. Reassure the person that they are safe. It's okay. I'll be right here. And then lastly, we talked about anxiety. The need here is for reassurance. And similar to shadowing, you want to identify the emotion, then validate and reassure, and finally, distract or redirect. Now, while we covered some examples of specific and targeted strategies for these behaviors throughout the session, I really want to emphasize that without getting into the details of a situation, it can be difficult to provide targeted strategies that work for everyone, especially within a 1-hour session like this. So because a person's behavior can be affected by their physical needs, their environment, their personality, the people around them, and so many other factors, there is no single solution or response that will be applicable to all of you listening to this session. And that is why we really want to encourage and understanding of the three-step approach. Again, the identifying the emotions, validating, redirect or distraction. But this needs to be in combination with an understanding of who the person is that you're caring for. And so we call that a person-centered approach, where how you respond will depend on who the person is, and what is important to them will be your best guide for figuring out a way to respond in that moment. If you would like to talk to a staff member about more specific strategies for your situation, then we encourage you to call our First Link Dementia Helpline, and we will brainstorm more targeted strategies for you. Their number is 1-800-936-6033. That's 1-800-936-6033. I want to acknowledge that caring for someone experiencing the symptoms can be very trying and even hurtful. If it's at all possible, take some time away from the person whenever you feel the need. Remember that these symptoms, as we've said, are the result of the disease. They are not willful or intentional. And although some of the accusations can absolutely feel so hurtful, try not to take them personally. It is common for care partners to feel guilty about how they may have responded in the moment. It's normal to feel upset if a family member accuses you of stealing or infidelity. We do the best we can each day. Caregiving is a learning experience, a hard learning experience, and you're not in it alone. You will learn from our webinars, phone calls, other caregivers, and you certainly will learn from your own experiences and especially your mistakes. It's okay to take risks, to try new approaches, struggle, try again. This is the way you're developing a caregiver skill set, and it will take time. In closing, I'd like to share a quote with you from the author David G. Allen. It's up on the screen now, and it says, "Patience is the calm acceptance that things can happen in a different order than the one you have in your mind." And on that note of encouragement, I would like to thank you so much for your time and for attending this session today. Goodbye.